Do you remember that poll that came out on the Sunday Times in 2020 asking what job was the most essential one to your society and which one was the least essential? 71% of voters voted that artist was the least essential job to society. I actually also remember that comment saying quite ironic that this graph was made by an artist. Because, well, it really was. It did spark outrage on social media from the countless people working within the arts feeling righteously underappreciated. The timing of this poll was also extremely ironic, actually, as we were all locked up in our houses, consuming art even more than usual. Let's be honest, who could have gone through those lockdowns without any music, any book, any film, any series, and still we'd be able to tell that they are sane today? The period humanity was going through at that specific time demonstrated the exact deep need we all have for art in our lives. Yet it was also that exact time that we voted that artist was the least essential job to society. Through history, we can observe that people have been consuming art in all of its form almost as much as they consumed food and water. In fact, we can witness art as far back as we can remember, both on an individual level and also on a human history level. So how come that people love and consume art, but despise so much the people making it? In this video, I will try to uncover the reasons why being an artist is still not recognized as being a real job and the consequences of this belief. And still until the end of this video, as otherwise it wouldn't have been good storytelling, but the most important reason, which is also a reason I believe not many people realize at all, is obviously kept for the end. When we think of a professional artist, we often picture this pedantic painter creating something obscure. When we talk about art, we often think of those grandiose paintings in expensive and pretentious galleries only passionate people will care about. Or we will think of that weirdo down the road dressing in an eccentric manner, sleeping all day, consuming and every now and then would perform in front of a small audience something he wrote on a napkin one night. After all, this cliché has been pictured numerous times in movies over the years. It has become this caricature of the artist, and it is usually the image we have in mind when someone mentions that they are a professional artist. But is this image really accurate and fair to what artists really are and what they do and how they contribute to society? Early in my research for this video, I found myself confronted with what I believe was the first problem. People don't seem to agree on what an artist is. And the ones of you who already know my video will know that I like a good old definition when terms seem unclear. And that is where I found the first reason why there is a big misconception around the artist. There seem to be two definitions for this word. First, someone who paints, draws, or makes sculpture. The second definition is the same, but they add also someone who performs music, thanks, and someone who creates things with great skill and imagination. I believe that the most common definition in people's mind is the first one, while in reality the second one is a lot more accurate and englobes many more professions. So when artists complain about their pay and their underappreciation, we talk about the second definition, not the first. So knowing this, let's analyze what your life would be without artists. You wouldn't have any music, any film, any series, any book, any painting, any illustrations, any sculpture. That old school photograph, But you would also not have your phone, your computer, your video game, your clothes, your car, your furniture, your house. Because all of these things were designed by artists. By artists, we mean musicians, actors, painters, sculptors. But we often forget that we also mean architects, designers, writers, photographers, dancers, filmmakers, and other professions done to an artistic level, such as makeup artists, decorators, cooks, and even gardeners, for example. The artistic creation is all around us, but somehow the people feel like it doesn't have much necessity to society. Or do they forget how much we actually need it? As let's face it, what a sad world this place would be without all of this artistic creation. On a less obvious, but nonetheless important note, artists have been contributing to even more than everything I have just mentioned, as their artistic vision has been at the source of countless technological, philosophical, medical, scientific, and even psychological advancement to society. Take Jules Verne, for example. He was a science fiction writer, but essentially he was the first one who conceptualized and imagined the idea of a submarine, a space rocket, a helicopter, electric power, and even ways of communication which would be close to what we would call internet today. On a philosophical point, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley are two writers who sadly envisioned dystopian ways where our society could go and try to warn us of it. Sadly, a lot of it has become true, but we still use their books to navigate through totalitarian trends and propaganda today. Although Da Vinci is mostly remembered for the Mona Lisa or the Vitruvian Man, he actually contributed to many advancements of his time, including in anatomy, in astronomy, in botany, in geometry, and even what is now called sacred geometry. He was the first to rightfully explain the hydrodynamics of the blood in the human body, for example. And he also designed hydraulic machines, war machines, and even flying machines which proved to be functional later on. The fact that artists have to think outside the box, stay curious, and use their imagination to constantly create new things is the perfect mindset needed to lead us through new breakthroughs, which leads me to my next point. The second main reason behind the misconception of the artist is their nature, which is their essence. Let me explain. Firstly, the creative process is something that goes against the corporate process, which our society is used to and is based on. The creative process is anti-conformist, messy, disorganized, slow, and unpredictable by nature. You never know when and how your next idea and breakthrough will happen. It is a process that is very difficult to restrain to a 9 to 5, with obvious and regular progress. Creativity and inspirations are things that are tricky to control, and the creative chaos are things difficult to value. And I will come back to this later in this video. Which means that society doesn't have the regular criteria to judge the work and the work in progress of an artist to define exactly how hard they are working and how much they contribute to society on an individual level for sure, but also on a more global level as a consequence of it. When someone comes and do some work for you, repairs for example, you see the progress of it, you see the result, but you also see the work. With artistic creations, it's different. You only see the result and you have no idea how much work it was actually needed to lead to it. That also makes it more difficult for society and people to understand the work needed to create art. By nature, creative work is like an iceberg. The final result that we see is always a tiny little part of the work needed to get to that point. We never show all the failed work that were needed to get to the final product, the hours of creative struggle to finally get to that breakthrough, then the hours spent actually creating and preparing the final product, which is often more than anyone could imagine. One of the greatest examples for this is the process that Leonardo da Vinci used to create his horse statue. He firstly spent hours analyzing horses' movement. He even dissected a few in order to represent very precisely every single little details of their bodies. Just his preparation was hours of scientific research and anatomic sketches. Some projects can take seconds and have worldwide recognition. And sometimes some work can take years of research and creative work, but only have mild recognition. Such is the creative work. Although most artists describe this, I believe until you start a creative work yourself, you will never understand the depth of the submerged part of the iceberg. The fact that most of artistic work is unseen and untalked about leads to think that not much work is needed in order to create artistic work, and therefore it is easy to see the artist as lazy simply because we don't understand the process and we don't see the process. The fact that the capitalist system dictates the corporate model as the only valid one doesn't actually make it so for some aspect of our society, including creative work. The last reason why there is a misconception around the artist is the fact that they often flirt with insanity. The examples of mental illness and neurodivergent profile within the artist are countless. As explained earlier, the nature of the profession itself requires artists to be in touch with their emotions rather than rationality, as they often need to think outside the box and be anti-conformist in their ideas and process. Neurodivergent people will find this task a lot easier and maybe more natural for them than other psychological profiles. I don't think that artistic creativity makes people insane, but I think that you need to be a little insane in order to be good at artistic creativity. Nietzsche even said in his book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, I tell you, one must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. This creates this very fine line between genius and complete insanity, which the public can hardly tell apart sometimes, making it difficult to tell the real value and sometimes intentions behind an artist's work. Although the nature of the job itself, as we have just seen, contributes to the misconception and underappreciation of the role of the artist in our society, the second main reason for this is the devaluation of art. It is obvious that our current society no longer values art. Before, artists were funded by rich patrons, simply because rich patrons saw great value in the art they helped fund. Nowadays, it is a lot less common for rich people to fund artists to create masterpieces. While we found pride and importance in the art in the past, spending an insane amount of money to build big buildings covered by glorious paintings, surrounded by giant statues, with government ordering symphonies from their best musicians, displaying higher level performers as a display of power and discipline, it is no longer the case now. Music is no longer national pride and is no longer funded like it used to. Buildings are designed to display power through heights instead of beauty. The most important visual arts nowadays are made by street artists, and generally speaking, we do not look to display power and discipline of a nation through its arts anymore. The biggest reason for this devaluation is said to be internet, and now AI making this trend worse. But I actually think that the internet is a means of devaluation rather than the real cause for it. I'm now entering the less obvious reasons for this phenomenon. We know well enough that artists have this big taboo around money. In fact, I covered it in my latest video called The Uncovered Truth about musicians' pay. Many people who, let's say, accept that artist is a real job that deserves a real pay, claim that this is due to the fact that musicians are bad at business and economics in general. And well, I've just kind of explained a little bit why this would be. However, I should also explain that the nature of art itself might be the biggest cause of this. Art is seen as being a part of one's soul, and it shouldn't be dictated by money in order for it to be genuine. Therefore, when an artist asks for a payment, they feel a bit dirty about it. And it's like they have just broken some untold rule about art. In my research, I found someone comparing this to a friend helping you out to move house, for example. And if now this friend asks for a little payment for his time and effort, well, it changes the whole sentiment about it, and we just don't really feel good about it. Somehow, it is the same about art. There is also this belief that if you do what you love, such as creating art, then you should accept a low pay because you're just having fun working, and that you're doing it for the right reason, for this romantic idea that you're doing it for the greater good of art and society as a whole. Well, if this argument was true, then I don't know why we don't apply it to other jobs, such as politicians. I believe that if you are working in politics, you should be doing it because you're passionate about what you do and you truly and genuinely want a better life for the people you work for, which is either your nation or your area or whatsoever. And a high pay would actually make it less genuine and more tempting to corruption. So I really wonder why this does not apply to politicians, when in fact I think it would probably be a way more interesting case of this romantic idea than artists. But the same would apply to a lawyer who just wants to believe in a more fair world and wants to contribute to it. And if you're really good at it and you love what you do, then you shouldn't really be expecting much pay from it. Or maybe a doctor. You just truly wants to make people healthier and live longer around you. This is a very noble cause. Why are you expecting a high pay from this? But somehow, with artists, that works. This romantic idea sticks. However, I actually don't think this is based on the history of this job. It is important to note that most of the masterpieces remembered today were in fact orders from rich clients, rather than art poured out of someone's heart just for the sake of beauty and necessity for art. The Mona Lisa, for example, of Leonardo da Vinci was an order by Francesco del Giocondo. Botticelli, Birth of Venus, was commissioned by the Medici family. Most of Shostakovich's symphonies were ordered by the Soviet state. And even some symphonies by Beethoven were commissioned by rich patrons, including the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra of London. However, these masterpieces are remembered and loved and respected through time, despite the initial intention being economics. This romantic idea of art and the guilt around monetization makes it difficult for artists to ask for the true value of their work. While this was not necessarily enabling artists in the past, as contrary to the common belief and romantic idea that artists are always poor and struggling, and that their struggle is what makes them create great things, we can think of many examples of which this statement would be wrong. Picasso and Dali, for example, were two very rich artists during their lifetime. Dali could sell blank canvas for a lot of money, making it easy for him to monetize his work and his activity, and therefore he could afford to create without any economical pressure. Johann Sebastian Bach is another example of this. His creations, songwriting was very visionary and revolutionized classical music for generations. However, his own compositions were probably a bit too visionary for his time and were not this popular during his lifetime. Still, he made a lot of money during his lifetime by being a successfully hired organ player, and this made it possible for him to create his own art without having any economical pressure too. While money can sometimes alter the genuinity and innovation of an artist's art, maybe, the fact that they could monetize it in other ways of their activities made it possible for them to create genuine art. And this is exactly what is disappearing today for artists, especially with AI. And this brings me to my last point, which I believe is the most important reason why being an artist is not seen as a real job which deserves a real pay today, and this belief somehow keep artists poor. My cynical self cannot help but ask the question: what has been the deep role of art in our society through the ages? Art being the language of emotions and being a highly social thing by nature, it has the power of changing the way we see and understand things, presented to us with words and logic. This means that art has the power to change the perception that people have about certain things, such as political issues, psychological issues, philosophical issues, and social issues, for example. It has the power to denounce and make people reflect on things they could have acquired as facts and never really questioned before. As art has the duty to innovate in order to remain relevant, so this is also made to think outside the box and increase the size of this box and maybe improve its beauty and its efficacy. These roles make people feel very uncomfortable. We don't like to be brought out of our comfort zone and our comfortable set of beliefs and our way of thinking. Art can act as a black mirror on a society, but also on an individual level. It can reflect maybe something in us we don't really want to see, or make us see something through an angle or a lens we would rather not really go and look. The best way to avoid this is to consume hollow entertainment instead of meaningful art, which aims at distracting you from your life instead of making you reflect and question it. And the more a society is sick, the more art can make them feel uncomfortable, as the situation is so bad that the discomfort becomes too big and too easily triggered. We now consume art like every other aspect of a society. It must be quick, it must be cheap, and we will consume it the exact same way. And my cynical self, again, cannot help but notice that this mostly benefits to the people in power. As I said, it can make people feel uncomfortable on their individual level, but it can also make a whole society feel uncomfortable about themselves and maybe request and lead to change. People in power would not want this, so they want to keep the artists poor and powerless while making sure the hollow entertainers keep the herd distracted. And this is where Aldous Huxley, with his book Brave New World, was an admirable visionary yet again. In fact, I will finish this video on a quote from his book. "I don't want comfort, I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin." Actual happiness always looks pretty squalid in comparison with the overcompensation for misery. Thank you very much for watching up until the end of this video. It really means a lot, and make sure to like and subscribe if you liked it, and let me know in the comments what you think about everything. I will probably develop some of those ideas in my future videos, so your comments can help this. And if you want to support my work, then you can support me on Patreon, and the link is linked in the bio. Thank you very much, keep creating and stay weird.